Well, I'm very pleased now to introduce Lara Carnelos. We're all of us very much in Lara's debt for organising this day and making it such an interesting and varied and stimulating day. Lara is a historian principally of 16th century Italian popular printing and diffusion of printing. She's worked on the Remondini and she's worked on 17th century Venice in particular, and most recently she's been here at the British Library working on the 16th century Italian popular books here and devising a methodology for analysing their subsequent diffusion and use. And we look forward to hearing more about this.
Thank you. I assure you that after there will be a coffee, so try to resist. Okay, so I will show you my my project, the result of my project, and this is a Marie Curie project, and it's this project saw the collaboration of three great centers of excellence: CERL, the British Library, and ICU, the Italian Agency for Cataloguing. And I would add also that I would not be here without Stephen Parkin and Cristina Dondi. So thanks to you. Thanks to you, I'm here. So the PATRIMONiT project focuses on the study of 16th century Italian popular books outside Italy, and we know that one of the most important collections of Italian books outside Italy is held at the British Library, with more than 10,000 16th century Italian books. I focus on popular books because they were produced not to last. So we have today just a few copies or just one copy in the world, if they survived at all. I will mention today two databases, EDI16, which is the Italian national database of 16th century Italian books. It is based in Rome, in ICU, in the Italian Agency for Cataloguing, and PATRIMONiT. PATRIMONiT is a newborn database, model on May, but for 16th century books. So during my presentation, I will show you my questions and then my method, and I explain you the result using this method. Question number one, how to locate these books? I mean, Italian 16th century popular books in the library. There are 10,000 of Italian 16th century books. So, first step, I read the short title catalog of the library to have an overview of the entire collection. Then I marked all the books with a recognizable popular title. That means author, printer, publisher, but also number of volumes. If there are 5 volumes, maybe it's not a very popular book. And then I also taken into consideration what was printed by Remondini. Remondini was the major chapbooks printer during 18th century Italy. And then the Venetian document. For my PhD, now many years ago, but I studied systematically the Venetian archive from the 16th century to the beginning of the 19th century. I tried to understand the production, distribution, and consumption of popular books. Then I decided the genre to work on. I located these books in the library through the shelfmark, and then I entered this information into EDI16. So the first genre I decided to work on is that of the sacre rappresentazioni, because I found, while reading the catalog, that there were so many in the library. There are 239 sacre rappresentazioni printed in the 16th century in the library, and 36 of these are unique copies or unique variant. That means they do not exist, they are not cataloged so far in Italian libraries. So the first step was to have edition data, to have a full bibliographical description. So the first step was to catalog these into EDI16. But they were not searchable like before an agreement. So some months ago, an agreement has been signed between the British Library and ICU, the Italian Agency for Cataloguing, and now it's possible to search for almost 9,000 16th century books which are in the British Library. And we are also adding many unique copies, so there are now more than 800 unique copies. Now you can search for that. The code is UK 0001. We hope one day there will be some other country and some other library. Question number 2, are they really popular? How can we know that these books were really popular during the 16th century? So for this, first, I contextualize the genre through bibliographical works and archival material to understand who wrote those texts, who printed them, what kind of text, and when they were printed, for whom was the audience. But my main question was how these books were produced. So I examine the materiality of these books. And then I enter these data into PATRIMONiT. So according to one of the last studies about civic theater in Florence, sacra rappresentazione, this religious place, is a pedagogical invention created by the Archbishop and the Medici in Florence in the 1440s to educate young people as perfect Christians and citizens. They were written by persons of the Medici entourage by using forms of oral communication to discuss current events and problems and to promote Medici politics. It was a very long-lasting genre. It was collected immediately by Hernández Colón in Spain at the beginning of the 16th century, but then they were printed massively during the 16th century, and then collected again in Spain and in Italy, and printed until the first half of the 19th century. But the materiality, were they popular? So I tried to transform the materiality into a cataloging field. So I tried to understand paper quality and printing defect. The material aspect of the copy, this part is what you can see in PATRIMONiT now. So about paper quality, I used an American project. You have the reference there, and use a number from 1 to 5 to understand the quality of this paper, of the paper used. So I was trying to check the presence of fibers, the presence of creases, particularly if these creases were on the title page. And then the presence of water drops, as you can see there, or very big water drops. So visible also without a light behind the paper sheet. The result, I studied Sacra Rappresentazione plus other books that were bound together with the Sacra Rappresentazione. So the corpus is 250 books. So the result was that they were printed with a paper quality from average to very poor. No one of these books were produced with a very good paper quality. Let's go to the printing defect. I prepared a list of printing defect with the help of Claire Bolton. And as you can see, printing defects are, for example, ink shoulders, uneven inking, smudged types, and then text printed on creased sheet that you can see that it is open. And then presence of ink spacing, inked air, and as you can see, the last one is San Diego, but there was some problem. So this is what I found about printing defect. These books were, so in each of these books we found more than 3 printing defects. So these, if we combine these with the paper quality, we can say, yes, they were popular. So we have the answer. Question number 3. I said that they were collected in Spain, they were collected in Italy, but in England. So where did they arrive in the UK and in the British Museum Library? For this, I examined material evidence in each book. analyze systematically the library archive and the acquisition policies. There you have the sources. And then I enter this data into PATRIMONiT. Outcome. We have some books which arrived here in the 16th century, other before the 18th century, but mainly after, mainly from the end of the 18th century. And in the British Library, mainly during the 19th century. So we have an entire library, the Library of Pinelli, which arrived from Venice to London directly, or other books came through France, Germany, Belgium, or from other British cities. About the sacre rappresentazioni, they arrived, the collection started in 1837, and as you can see, the collection was developed during the first century, and there are some later acquisitions. The collection started in 1837, just 1 year after Anthony Panizzi said this in front of the select committee. Panizzi became keeper of printed books in 1837. So he said they were trying to understand how to create a national library. So he said, it is of less importance for the Library of the British Museum to have common modern books that to have rare, ephemeral, voluminous, and costly publications which cannot be found anywhere else. This changed the acquisition policy of the library, and the collection started. Here you can see the year of the acquisition and the number of sacre rappresentazioni acquired. And in the first corner, you can see that Panizzi was keeper of printed books, and then Panizzi was principal librarian, and then there was Winter-Jones principal librarian, but Winter-Jones was assistant before. So there is a continuity from 1837 until the 1870s. This needs to be put in relation with the purchase grant of the library. In 1837, that is the big, I don't know if I have the, no, it's not working, okay. In 1837, Panizzi asked for £10,000 for acquiring books. This lasted just 2 years, 2-3 years, because then there was no space in the library, so they have to wait some years until another part of the library was built. So then they could ask again for £10,000 for acquiring books. I want to show you just an example of a story of one book from Italy to England, to the British Library. So this is the Sacra Rappresentazione di Lazzaro, printed in Florence in 1581. So far is the only copy that I know that is catalogued. And we have these small numbers in front. Well, analyzing other similar books entered the library the same date in 1867, we found that there are some numbers. And in the last one, you see that the corner was restored, probably because there was a number behind. So this, I think Paolo mentioned already Pinelli. Pinelli was a Venetian collector, and we found Lazzaro 1581. The library, Pinelli's library, was purchased in stock by London bookseller James Edward, and here we have again Lazzaro 1581. And then the story is very complicated. But what I want to show you is that they arrived, these 2 volumes and our Lazzaro 1581, they arrived in the library of Henry Wellesley in Oxford, 1866. Henry Wellesley was curator at the Bodleian Library and curator at the Taylor Institute. And why so important? Because Rye, assistant keeper of printed books at that time, wrote a report to the trustees here in the library. And he said, there is this sale of the late Henry Wellesley. And he said, this collection is particularly rich in Italian literature and includes a remarkable series of rappresentazioni sacre. It will supply many deficiencies of this class in the museum library. So, we have the trustees that sanctioned the purchase. They gave £400 to purchase printed books, the Henry Wellesley sale, and the book was purchased. Here there is a part of the invoice, so we know that Lazzaro, 1581, entered the library in 1867. Now, I'm trying to do this. I want to show you this record. We try to see if this we can do. Yes. So this is the same record, but in PATRIMONiT. So I want to show you this part. So the first part, the first area is the part of the bibliographical description. Then we have further bibliographical description with the subject. That is the same system used by May. And then we have other texts included in this edition. And then we have the description with icon class code of images, because then the project will be evolved. The link to the copy in the British Library, and then the description of the copy in the British Library, and then the material aspect of the copy, and then Maffeo, Pinelli, Edwards, Spencer, Trifuk, Ebert, Thorpe, Wellesley, and then Wood. And then the description with the reference here at the British Library. So here you have all the description of what I've said and what I show you. So I go back here. I have the last question. Okay, question number 4. How important was popular material in 19th century England and in the British Museum Library? So, I examined the status and condition of the selected books, try to understand how these books were preserved once acquired. Analyzed the preservation policies of the British Museum Library in the 19th century. So I checked the shelfmark, the archival material, and the binding. And then I taken into consideration different opinions about popular material in the same period. Writers, collectors, librarians. Let's see the result. Status and, this is Stephen. Well, okay, so the books are in very good conditions here. As you can see, modest condition means that the binding is partially broken or there are some lacuna, but usually they are in very good conditions. And this because they were preserved very well. A part of some of these sacre rappresentazioni were preserved in a special area of the library, that is the C34 bookcase. This bookcase was locked, glazed, put in a separated part of the library to preserve the most valuable items. So they were popular, but they were preserved very well. And then the binding. Some of these sacre rappresentazioni were bound with this kind of binding. The full Morocco was used by Panizzi after 1837 to preserve the most valuable items of the library. He said, when a book goes into the reading room, which is handsomely bound, the reader who has it takes more care of it. And the readers who are about him, if he were to ill-use the book, would remark it. So that's why. But we can check other opinions. So these are paper sheets written, manuscript notes that are added to the volumes in the library. The first one is Roscoe, William Roscoe, British writer. In front of a poem about a war, an Italian war, he said, this might possibly throw additional light upon this eventful period of Italian history. So it was important for him to mention this for historical, as an historical source. The second one is Thomas Granville, collector. He bequeathed his library to the British Library in 1847. And there are 5 Italian tracts printed in Rome. And at the end, he said, these are very interesting and exceedingly rare. For a collector, it was particularly interesting that these books were rare. So rarity was a very important element. But this is Panizzi, just to show you, I don't know what is, oh, okay. This is Panizzi. So the importance of popular material is not regarding only Italian material, is regarding other kinds of material. So Panizzi is trying to convince the trustees to buy a collection of French romances of chivalry and chronicles. And he said, these works are considered of great importance, not so much as bibliographical curiosities, as record of the manners, customs, state of learning of the Middle Ages, and also extremely useful document for the history of the modern languages of the south of Europe. So the importance for the history of the language and history of social, cultural history of a country. This is Guglielmo Libri in front of the select committee. This is not Guglielmo Libri, but this is what Guglielmo Libri said in 1849 in front of the select committee on public library. He said, it is in the fragment now so rare, precious, of some alphabet, of some small grammars published for the use of school, etc., that bibliographers now seek to discover the first processes employed by the inventors of xylography and of typography. Nothing should be neglected. Nothing is useless to whoever wishes thoroughly to study a subject. Again, so we have alphabet, grammars, letters used for this reason. Last one is this is Winter Jones, and as I said, he was keeper of printed books during when Panizzi was principal librarian, and he was accused by Thomas Phillips, at that time he was trustee, in 1862, to buy just a parcel of penny chapbooks. So this is the defense. This is the defense. He said, it would be impossible for anyone to acquire correct knowledge of the literary history of England during the 16th and 19th century without having access to such books as are contained in the collection. They form one of the channels through which we are enabled to obtain a view of the mind and morals of the people. And whenever chapbook is the only representative of one's popular work, the importance of such a book becomes very great. So this is the answer. Yes, they were very important books for the British Library and for England. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. That was very interesting indeed, and a glimpse of what looks as though it will be a fascinating project in addition to Edit 16 and to our understanding of the genre. Questions? Yes. Sorry.
I'm glad we were thinking along the same lines, because I was thinking of chapbooks in the way through, on the way through your talk, and also 17th century English broadside ballads, which were produced on cheap paper, throwaway items. I was just wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about how the Italian popular books were sold. Were they sold in the same way as broadside ballads, sort of street hawkers selling them? And whether they were used in the same way after being read, for example, being used to bake cakes with, and
yes.
so on.
Yes, well, during the 16th century, they were sold through different channels. They were sold in shop, bookshop, but also other kind of shops, and cafeteria, for example, or other osteria, or other social center. So they were sold in different shops, but also they were sold by itinerant booksellers. So with a basket, without the basket, just streaming on the street, or with a stall on the street. And so there are different ways these books were sold. Similar way, yes. I think there are some connections between the ways these books were sold. We are studying this. I'm part of an international project at POP, and she is a member too, Julian Simpson, and we are trying to discover, we are trying to investigate if there are some common ways to study this kind of material, and if there is an European dimension of these material. Francesca is part two, Cristina, Sabrina, so we are many. So yes, these are questions that we are trying to address.
I wonder, is Libri really a good witness
Oh, well.
these things, and should one not rather put it into a context of romanticism and nationalism expanding very much in all countries?
Well, Libri...
in all national libraries, I would say.
Yes, Guglielmo Libri was accused of stealing books. For this, I think, was the question. Well, in that case, I think that we can rely on this, on what he said, even if we know that he was a bibliomaniac and his house was full of books. About romanticism, yeah.
I mean, he had two faces.
Yes, yeah, two phases. But at the other side, there was these books in the libraries were not so well protected, so there was no protection in the library. So yes, it just in some way it saved some books. But yes, yes, probably two phases. And the second question was about romanticism. Yes, we can say yes, but in Italy, these books were discarded. Instead, in England, they were ready to collect them already at the end of the 18th century. So we can see the difference between Italy and England. So yes, maybe there is, but there is also particular attention to this kind of books.
Yeah, I'm sorry, because I was stumbling on, but I mean, classicism is also a kind of romanticism. I mean, collecting everything from the classical antiquity. I am a classical scholar, so is in the same vein as this kind of.
Yes, because they are discovering.
That are not of any use for scientific development and that kind of thing, which people also were beginning to think about. So
Yes, I think the book collection changed after at the end of the 18th century, at the beginning of the 19th century. So that was the feeling. Something was changing. They were searching for editio princeps, but also rare books, but also vernacular books. And so maybe that was part of an entire change in book collecting.
I think one last question.
To follow on, sorry.
Yes,
on that,
all right.
Granville, Heber, and those, they didn't really go for this kind of books. They went for classics. And so Sina Panizzi showing interest for a more popular form of books is inevitably showing an evolution, a progression, a change in the taste, in the overall taste for collecting that must be part of our second nature. But that manifests in different ways in different times.
But I think, as Lazzaro showed very well, I mean, Grenville's interest was in rarity, and he was interested in having books that his competing collectors wouldn't have, whereas Panizzi, I think, really genuinely has a visionary approach to the library that he's building and sees the social historical importance of that material. So it's not just because it's rare, but of course the fact that it comes through Grenville or through similar collectors means that the choices that Panizzi makes are to some extent controlled already by the way in which the collecting and the trade in England and on the continent is the preoccupations of the collectors and the trade at that time.
Yes, I want to add this, that I'm reading the correspondence of Panizzi, between Panizzi and Grenville, and Panizzi was helping Grenville with his library. So sometimes it was Panizzi say to Grenville what to buy. So maybe there was an attention.
But several times, because he started doing that when he had already convinced Grenville to bequeath the library.
Yes.
So there's this sort of like strange combination in which he was the consultant for Grenville,
Yes.
knowing that the library will end up in the British Library.
Yes.
Quickly follow up on the Libri. I think his comment is all more important because, as far as I recall, in his many, say, catalogues, there's no trace of popular books. So he remarked the importance, but the historical importance, but he didn't steal them. And so
Well,
I think
there
in this
are-
case his argument is strong enough.
There are in his catalog some popular books, but they were collected because they were unique copies.
Sure.
So he was quite pay attention to
I'm
that.
not saying that his comment was, for the British Library to buy books so that he would be able to steal them.
No, for sure.
In this case, it wasn't like that. And France, by the way, was.
Yes.
Is
So, Christy.
May I just say something? No, not this.
Yes.
I think, well, you tell me what you think. There is an aspect of this, I think, tremendous research that still needs proper understanding. And it is, first, how did these books got out of Italy? But if they don't, if there are a number of unique copies, were they unique at the time they were disposed of in Italy, or what happened there? Why Italy let go of this material? This needs to be addressed.
Well, I think I can answer with this. Before 1852, these sacre rappresentazioni were collected in the C34 shelfmark, so in a particular shelfmark. After 1852, they were collected in another part of the library. That's because in 1852 there was the publication of the first bibliography on sacre rappresentazioni. So after the publication of a bibliography showing that there was a list of other libraries having those copies, having those libraries, that they just changed the shelf mark, the location of these books in the library. So they found something else. So they were not so precious as before because there was something published. So, about Italy, we don't know why these books were discarded, but I will try to answer going on with the project.
Well, I think we need to call a halt there,
Yes.
but thank you very much, Lara, and